Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of CN Pony Analysis, we are going to be taking a look at the upcoming version 3.5 banner that's going to be Hysilens for DOT, Cerydra for hypercarry skill duplication support, as well as the rerun banners for Kafka and Silver Wolf. And jumping straight into Hysilens, she does herself with a tech down, defense down, vulnerability, as well as built-in DOT. Likely going to be the savior of the DOT society, but the main question is, can DOT compete with the main team comps that we are seeing currently in version 3. Early access for Hysilens is going to be coming extremely soon, so looking forward to that as well. So currently for Hysilens, she can be seen applying additional DOT based on the existing DOT on target while applying the DOT by herself, meaning you can have all 4 DOTs as long as you have Hysilens on the battlefield. On top of that, we do see Kafka triggering a DOT on the enemy mob, which results in an additional physical bleed damage trigger, most likely because of Hysilens as well. And the ultimate is going to be the same mechanic and timing as Tribi and Ramei, meaning the buffs are going to be lasting based on her own terms. So for the verdict for Hysilens, it's going to be a 10 out of 10 for DOT mains, otherwise it's just going to be a 1.9 out of 10. Or you can just call it 1 out of 10. Because CN believes that Hysilens will have no issue in making DOT the strongest they've ever been ever since Black Swan's release way back in February of 2024, easily running the triple DOT team, which has extremely high synergy with one another. But the main question is going to lie in, while Hysilens can make DOT stronger, is DOT as a whole strong enough to compare to their version 3 counterparts, especially for players thinking of picking up an archetype fresh from the ground up, meaning investing all of the units, all of the relics, all of the light cones, and all of the costs with regarding the team, right? So at the end of the day, DOT is essentially going to be a version 1 mechanic that functions very similarly ever since day 1, applying your debuffs and DOTs to deal as much damage as possible over time, especially with the Arcana ramp up as well as the Kafka DOT procs. That being said, Hysilens is highly unlikely to function without Kafka's extremely high DOT proc frequency with virtually no other substitute in our entire game. And Black Swan is possibly the highest damage amplification, meaning your team building for DOT is more or less going to be fixed unless she has a potential with Akron debuff stacking. So while this mechanic is going to be unique and fun by itself, you know, DOT, let's stack on all of the things, you have seen the damages in NCU, absolutely very satisfying, but you cannot really ignore the fundamental issue for DOT, which is going to be your backloaded damage on top of the fact that you need to reapply all of these debuffs and DOTs at the same time. Meaning for our current endgame content with our multi-wave targets such as Pure Fiction, Memory of Chaos, as well as the 2-phase or even 3-phase bosses, DOT has a permanent disadvantage of not applying just the debuffs but also the DOTs, unlike an Akron crit based team, which means that you are going to taking more actions and more turns in order for your damage to actually take into full effect, especially when you're up against bosses that after every single stage, every single phase, they're just going to cleanse everything and go back to square one again. So in an action value or turn-based game like Honkai Starbucks, DOT will always fundamentally be weaker than their buff counterparts or teams that require less setup such as your crit DPS or even break DPS, unless we have a content that has a single massive HP share. So if that ever happens, then DOT might actually see play again. And at the end of the day, if your investments have been made and you do want to commit into DOT, then Hysilens is going to be a no-brainer pool option. Likely you probably want to consider her signature Lycone and the Idolins to have the best potential of competing with your version 3 archetypes, just like E1 Tribi as well as E1 Sunday. Otherwise, most players with version 3 or other version 1 and version 2 teams will probably find much better cost benefits in vertical supports such as Tribi, Sunday, and Robin, as well as their respective Idolins and signature Lycones. Jumping into Cerydra, she is going to be our version 3 hypercarry support, which may or may not work with Sunday, or she's just gonna straight up just replace him, right? She has the unique ability of allowing a DPS to cast their skills consecutively twice at 6 stacks of the little chess pieces on the top of their border over there. Open up a floodgate of team building possibilities in which, you know, I'm not looking forward to her arrival, but currently the most obvious pick for her teammate is definitely going to be going to Finon, while other units may also see potential such as Anexa, Herda, as well as even Archer himself. She also has her own attack, speed, crit damage, and res pen buffs applied all in one kit, making her generally quite universal for any attack scaling DPS. Now, out of all of the prominent picks in version 3, Finon is going to be the definitive best in slot with Cerydra because its enhanced skill can also be copied like they have mentioned in the live stream itself, while having the single highest skill burst in the entire game. I can imagine after including final with Cerydra, he is gonna be completely transcending the plane of your DPS scalings, most likely competing with Cassius, if not even outperforming Cassius, especially if you're going to be running him as a sustainless DPS. Similar to Aircron with Jiao Qiu, Firefly with Field, as well as Cassius with Hysilens. For other DPSs such as Alexa and Archer, while having double skills can be quite nice, their individual skills actually hit much quicker because you don't really charge as much as Final's enhanced skill, meaning that for each individual skill itself, it's going to be having a less multiplier in order to compensate for the highest charge up time. I'm not too sure if Herda can actually want a double enhanced skill at maximum efficiency, because it will always consume the very first 42 steps of interpretation, meaning the second skill will deal far lesser amount of damage. So you're probably considering of using Cerydra to charge Herda's energy a little bit quicker, but in that sense, Sunday can pretty much going to be doing the same thing, and Herda definitely wants an evolution teammate. So other considerations may also include Aircron and Facial, because their higher skill frequency can also lead to a higher stack generation for their ultimates, which indirectly buffing their ultimate uptime is not going to be able to be achieved with an energy buffer such as Sunday. So in terms of verdict, if you are going to be a final main, then Cerydra is pretty much going to be a Jiao Qiu out of 10. And we all know what happened to Jiao Qiu with Aircron ever since he released back in I think 1 year ago, right? Otherwise, this is going to be a 6 out of 10. Now, CM believes that you pretty much can't go wrong with a Harmony support in Honkai support rail, and even Spargo has a dust knocked off the shelf after a while back, because we do have the introduction of Archer, which has been one of, if not the strongest single target free DPS we have seen in the entire game. It is not a question of if, but a question of when will a support have a DPS that is gonna be tailoring both of them into one to have their kits being utilized at the highest value as well as efficiency. For players not maining Finon, Cerydra may likely still work as a side grade to Sunday or even as a supplement, but the value will likely not be as high as Finon DPS upgrade. If you do not really have a problem to fix, for example, if you're already gonna be using a fully decked out Cassius Team 1 with a Dioda Team 2 or an Archer Team 1, Saber Team 2, Aircron Team 1, Firefly Team 2, whatever the team is going to be, especially if you have been committing into their vertical investments, Cerydra is probably not going to fix any of the current issues, because their issues has already been fixed by their respective team comps. So if you are going to be making a support character very niche tied to this like double skill proc generation, if the current scaling DPS, get it, scaling DPS is not going to be performing like maybe like a 1 year or 1.5 years down the road, then you might want to consider if Cerydra can actually scale well into version 4 or even the later halves of version 4 to see if she can function with another version 4 DPS that utilizes multiple skill usage. So that is pretty much it, and now we're just going to jump to the rerun banners, which is honestly very straightforward. So between both rerun banners, Kafka and Silver are not bad, but they're definitely not for every single player. So Kafka is going to be a very good addition, almost a must pull for anyone that intends to play DOT. I would say Kafka likely even has a higher priority than Hysilens, because if you really want to play DOT, nobody in the entire game has a trigger frequency compared to Kafka, whereas for DOT damage multipliers, you can use Black Swan, you could even consider using a 4-star, and you know, even though their performance might suck a lot more, you really want the DOT triggers with Kafka. And DOT's biggest issue right now is not really just their damage, but the proc frequency, as well as how quickly can you actually apply all of your different debuffs and DOTs, right? For Silver Wolf, she is going to be mainly for a very general usage, right? She's going to be an AoE debuffer, as well as applying your weakness if black for your epoch shadows, you know, implying the right weakness so that your DPS can be on target. But aside from that, if you already have locked down your teams, so you can't really fix in a Silver Wolf upgrade where the Stellar Jade spent on Silver Wolf will bring you a direct investment for your value that you're going to be spending on Silver Wolf. Aside from potentially the Aircron vertical investments, where this is going to be her current best installed team as of now, because if you could use Silver Wolf elsewhere, they might just be better alternatives like the general debuffers, the tricycle teams, your Cypher, for higher value for the very same amount of Stellar Jades, right? For vertical investments into Silver Wolf as well as Kafka, E1 for both units are very nice, as well as their E2, although that's going to be a little bit costly, so do weigh your options a little bit more carefully. For the signature light cones, Kafka S1 brings her speed as well as her own unique DOT Erode, which is separate from a lightning DOT being shocked, but tutorial mission exists for a berry Kafka, so the additional energy regeneration may see even higher usage than Kafka's signature light cone. For Silver Wolf S1, why is this thing still in the game? You know, so that is pretty much it. And now jumping down into the potential weaknesses for Hysilens as well as Cerydra. For Hysilens, if you do not want to play DOT, her value pretty much just goes out the window unless you can run her as a debuffer in general teams, in which that case, Silver Wolf might even compete for an even higher use case, right? Outside from that, she also has really restrictive team building because DOT really only has the 3 banners, Blackswan, Kafka, and Hysilens. Pick your poison, right? And then for the DOT comp itself, I have mentioned just now the potential flaws with DOT, which is as the future enemy environments, we are going to be seeing multi-wave content, multiple phase changes where the boss are going to be cleansing every single one of the debuffs and DOTs. Then this entire archetype is just going to be performing at a much lower rate compared to the other team comps, right? And then for Cerydra, she seems to be very nice on paper, but also kind of niche. And as we have learned by now, the more niche a unit is, be it a DPS or a support, the harder they will fall once their niche falls out of the flavor, right? It can be either the niche DPS falling out of the flavor, or it can be the niche support falling out of the flavor because there was a better DPS or a better support, whichever is gonna be. Having a more general usage in the kit is going to give you a little bit more of a guarantee, especially if the environment change in the future, because the environment is always going to be constantly changing within a gacha game, right? So something for you guys to consider, especially for the non-final mains out there. So in summary, DOT mains can definitely get their Hysilens, but you do want to consider getting Kafka first before Hysilens, especially if you do not own Kafka. Then for the final mains, simply just pick up Cerydra if you have a strategy remaining. But I do want to say that for version 3.5, this is going to be a very divisive patch, because first of all, we pretty much have a very big, what looks like a very big story update, which probably isn't going to be happening in a single patch, because Enforcers ends by version 3.7, which means we have 3 more patches of Enforcers before everything comes to a close. So looking to see if 3.5 really has enough build up and hype, especially coming down from Absolute Cinema, that's going to be version 3.4. Aside from that, it is just going to be the 2 mini games, one of them being the Dream Gem event, which is very nice, and then one more being the free Stellar Jace event that we have seen so far, right? Pretty chill patch if I can say so myself. But for the actual units, on one hand, you do have the first ever DOT update ever since Black Swan for all of the DOT mains. On the other hand, you also have Cerydra bring final mains closer to Aeonhood. But that being said, for players that are not interested in DOT, you're not interested in Final, and you're pretty much playing with your same old teams, you probably don't really see that much value in pulling for these units, especially when it comes to opportunity costs in Honkai Star Rail, vertical investments, and horizontal investments, particularly with the brand new 3-team content, as well as the release of the Alter Ego for March 7th, Dunhaig, as well as the brand new Elysia having been teased for version 3.6 as well as above. You might see a little bit more value just chilling and waiting to see what the future has to fold, because as of this current moment, both units are not definitive must pulls, similar to a unit such as, for example, 3B back when she first launched, right? So looking forward to the C server for Hysilens for a closer insight, but at this point, that is pretty much it for CM pulling opinions. Let me know what you guys think in the comments if you're going to be pulling for any of the 2 units. With that, we've come to the end of today's content. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter, join our Twitter, join our Patreon for anime reviews. Use code for 10% off, and all the best for Gacha Boost. I'll see you guys next time.